If I were to ask you to draw a brain, most of you would draw something that looks a little bit like this, which is this sort of round, big organ with these dips within it that I've shown by these little squiggles, and maybe you know that there's sort of, it's divided into lobes, so there's one lobe here and there's another one up here. This is part of the brain, but it's not all of the brain, and this is known as your cerebrum or cerebral cortex. And what this is involved in is, this is the clever bit of your brain. This is what does all the things that you think your brain does. The brain does more than you think, but this is what controls your sight or your decision making. So your decision making, or your movement, so starting your movements. So I'm going to put initiating there because there's other things that does that. So initiating your movements and your senses as well. So this is your areas that process your senses. So touch, smell, for example. And just to give you an example of how it's divided into lobes, I'm going to do this in red. So this is your frontal cortex, frontal, which is involved in your decision making. So your frontal cortex, this area of your brain here, is involved in your decision making. So if that were to get lost or broken or die, you would have very poor decision making. This area at the back is your occipital lobe. So your occipital. And that is involved in your sight. So if you were to damage this area, you would go blind. And finally, your movement and your sight at either side of that little line. So we've got movement and sight here and here. But that is not all that the brain is. The brain also has other parts, and you need to know a few of them. So one of them is this little area down here, and it looks like a little brain. Cerebellum. And in Latin, little brain means cerebellum, or cerebellum means little brain. And that's exactly what it is. It looks like this little attachment at the bottom that looks very similar to the one above. But the cerebellum, again, has a slightly different sort of role. So this is your sort of muscle memory. I'm going to put that in inverted commas so you don't think that's what it's called. So it's involved in fine tuning movements. And it's also involved in your posture. So when you don't realize how you're sitting, it's subconscious. So your posture and your balance. So all these times, basically, it's involved in subconscious movement. All those times that you can do things or do things with your body without really realizing it, this is what controls it. So your cerebellum, your muscle memory, doing a tennis serve, you're a great tennis player, doing a dance routine that you've done 1,000 times, it's your cerebellum rather than your cerebral cortex. But the things you really should know are your posture and your balance. You don't think about them a lot. And then below, we've got this little area at the bottom that looks like the stalk. This looks like the stalk that holds up your brain. So this whole area is known as your brain stem. But you only need to know one area in it, which is about here, where this dot is. And what this area is called is it's the medulla oblongata. And this is involved in really sort of primeval, very basic control mechanisms. So things that you really need, the really important stuff. So your heart rate is controlled here. Your breathing rate is controlled here. And your blood pressure is controlled here. So really, really basic stuff. Subconscious, very, very, very simple things. You know how there's that saying that you can cut the head off a chicken and it will still survive for a bit? That's sort of true. But if you cut if you cut off the medulla oblongata, the chicken would die. So if you cut this part of the chicken off, it would be all right. But if you cut it here, it wouldn't, because it's such an important area for such sort of primeval, basic things in keeping you alive. So the medulla oblongata is a part of the brainstem. You have other parts of the brainstem, just to show you what I mean. So this area here is called the pons. So there's other bits is all I'm trying to say, but it's a part. Then, so I'm going to draw it all the way down here. So the bit of your body that descends, the part of your central nervous system that descends down your vertebrae, down your backbone, is known as your spinal cord. And your spinal cord is involved in reflexes, so muscular reflexes. So for example, when the doctor hits you on the knee, those signals don't go up to your brain. Those signals don't go up to your brain. So I just want you to know that the spinal cord is involved in reflexes or muscular reflexes. Or like, for example, dropping a hot kettle. If you pick up a kettle, you don't consciously think, oh, that's hot, I should probably drop that. You just drop it without thinking. So these are your reflexes. They're very fast, and we'll learn more about them as the term and we go through Unit 2. And finally, I just want to make it abundantly clear. So your brain plus your spinal cord is your central nervous system, which is shortened a lot to CNS. And this is just billions and billions, maybe even trillions, we're not too sure, billions of nerve cells. So you do have other nervous systems. You've got your peripheral nervous system, which would be the nerves that go to your muscles, and you also have the nervous system that controls your gut, which is known as your enteric nervous system. But this is the nervous system that I want you to know. And as I said, everything in yellow is stuff that you need to know. So please do feel free to learn it and engrave it on your mind.